Hi, Misha here, and this is part 2, looking at the U.S. Colonial Marines, the Colonial Marine Corps. Part 1, we looked at the Sulaco, the dropship, the APC, and for that matter, the Smartgun, or the drone gun, I should say. Part 2, we're going to look at the equipment, general issue, yes, the guns, the weaponry, but also things like the equipment on the belts, the backpack, the armor, so on and so forth. And then in part 3, we'll get more into the story element, the individual Marine unit that was sent to LV-426, and some of their own kind of personal equipment. So with that, let's dive in. Last time we left off kind of briefly talking about the UA-571 sentry gun, automated gun, drone gun, and we will get to that. But we're really going to talk about the organization of the Colonial Marines, their hardware, their weapons, and really focus in on that. So, we'll get on to it. NECA hasn't given us nearly all the Marines from Aliens, but we have enough to at least show off the weapons and gear. And the platoon is the basic fighting unit. It allows them to project force anywhere in the colonies, extrasolar, long duration, independent operation thought, and typically a full strength platoon is 25 members, but often depending on the mission, it's far fewer than this. For example, in Aliens, we have a total of really 13 members all told, so about half strength, which is common for a rescue whatever type mission. The platoon would be led by a lieutenant, and would be supported by one or two synthetics or artificial people. So let's begin with Bishop, or rather Lance Bishop. Here's the figure from NECA. Again, this is 7-inch scale, and he's right about 7 inches, portrayed by Lance Henderson. Lance Bishop is kind of where the name comes from. Now, he's a Bishop series android, which is a Hyperdyne Systems model 341B. Ash from the original Alien was a 220A. I think it was an A series anyway. Well, this is a B Bishop series. So, of course, they're mass-produced, said to be designed by Michael Bishop of Weyland-Yutani. And it's also said that each Bishop that comes off the line has a bit of a randomized personality. But they have many things in common. For one, unlike Ash, they're built with the 3 laws of robotics. Probably a good thing, even though some attempts by the company were to override them. This also means that they are a pacifist. We see Bishop in the film try to be handed a gun several times and it doesn't work out. So something him and Sigourney Weaver would have in common. Anyway, what do they do then? Well, they can still do plenty of things. For one, Bishop serves as the executive officer. I don't know why I keep saying that. I swear I haven't been drinking. He is more attached to the Sulaco than the squad, the section that we actually see of Marines, but they have met him before. It's obvious at the beginning of the film. But they work for the ship more than anything else, and they help the command structure. They serve as technicians, scientists, researchers. Also, they can serve as medics, and often they can serve as APC drivers and or dropship pilots in an emergency. Plenty of non-combat roles that can be done. Now, what's nice, even if they're pacifists, that frees up other Marines to still do their Marine duties. So just kind of a backup. And of course, being a synthetic, they have attributes like they're a walking database. They don't really get tired, and have better reflexes and overall better strength. Of course, they're not human. They have a synthetic skeleton with vat-grown muscles and then vat-grown tissue over that. The milky substance is said to be a latex type lubricant or fluid. They can eat and drink to mimic socialization. And that's kind of what they're designed for, these newer versions, to be more personable, amiable, crack jokes, get to know people. Why not? And it was a nice contrast after Ash in the first film to see a good android, of course, although it took Ripley time. I have him here with the light he does come with. He also, of course, comes with the knife. Just a standard combat knife here that I believe in the film he actually takes this from Hudson. But it's just a standard Marine knife. And since he is a pacifist, I had a spare tracker. We'll talk about these in a minute. And I did put it in his hand just to give him something else to do. He doesn't actually have one in the film, I believe, but it complements his science-y role, I thought. Why not? Neat figure. One of the earlier ones, I think it was in Series 3. They also have one where he's cut up. Interestingly, he has a power cell, and it needs to be recharged roughly every 400 days, so a little over a year. And the synthetics, or artificial person, really doesn't have any self-healing capabilities, at least very minor. So they do require routine maintenance. Even if they're not injured in the field, their musculature can and will break down over just, stress and use. So basically, these guys get refreshed every 2 to 3 years, new muscle layover, new thing, and of course that gives them a certain life expectancy, which is a bit of a Blade Runner vibe. But yeah, who doesn't like Bishop? He's certainly a favorite when we were kids. Fun fact, Lance Henderson here played the Terminator. Well, he was actually going to before Arnold was found, but in some test screenings and stuff for Cameron, he did. So I always kind of found that interesting. So even though we don't have Lieutenant Gorman, which would be kind of cool, honestly, we do have Bishop, and so he's kind of part of more of the command crew. He's seen as more the officer class, even if he's a synthetic. Responses to him, okay, Ripley, we understand why that's kind of controversial. The Marines treat him different ways. Some are very respectful, some kind of treat him like a tool. Just kind of depends. And of course, there is the famous knife trick. He does actually come with a knife-wielding hand as well. I wish he had a knife scabbard, but I guess since it's not actually his knife, that's okay. So, what about the combat? How does the platoon break down? The platoon would be made up of 1 to 2 sections consisting of 8 Marines. Obviously in the film we have just one section of 8, and it would be led by a sergeant. We don't have Sergeant Apone, but we do have a different sergeant that'll work. Here we have Sergeant Craig Wendricks. Don't recognize the name? You can Google it. It's an interesting story of how this figure came to be with NECA. I do find it interesting we have him, who does have sergeant stripes, and not Apone. Now there is an Apone that's in the Kenner line, but nah, that's not really my style. But here he is in full M3 armor dress with the M10 helmet. We'll get to all that. And he has his M41A slung. He didn't actually come with this. I've kind of customized him a little bit, at least what he's carrying. That's kind of the nice thing about him not being in the film. You can really just do what you want. And in his hands, he has the standard service pistol, sometimes called the Mark 88 Mod 4, which is a military enough sounding name, we often just call it the HK VP70, which was what it was. In 1985-86, when they were making the film, James Cameron and others thought this was a reasonably futuristic-looking handgun that people weren't really aware of, so they used it. It's kind of interesting to think of a gun that didn't really take off so well becoming standard, but okay, there could have been worse choices. At least it is a gun nominally meant for actual military use. In the film, we see Lieutenant Gorman and Private Frost using these. We also see the dropship pilots, so it's kind of a sidearm for someone who's doing something else as their primary function. Pretty neat. Let's get a closer look. Here's a real HK VP70. Not a lot of these were made. And over on the main Mishaco channel, done a video too on these. I understand, it's very futuristic looking. In the real world, this was the first polymer framed handgun to be put into mass production. And it was designed to be cheap, efficient, easy to operate, very few controls. Now in the Aliens universe, we're about to talk about caseless ammunition. And you might think, well, this has an ejection port, so it wasn't shooting caseless. Well, the thing is, even with caseless, you need a way to eject a round if it fails to go off, malfunctions, or you just need to unload the chamber. So it's possible even a caseless gun would still have some type of ejection system. So you can't assume that it isn't. And of course, in the real world, this is a 9x19 Parabellum Luger NATO pistol, and in the real world, it's one of the very few blowback 9mm. It's pretty unique, and it's a double action only, meaning the trigger pull is very long. On the other hand, good for Marines, it has a very high capacity magazine of 18+1. Not impressive today, maybe, but back in the 70s when these came out, and even in the 80s when Alien was made, considering the relatively small size of this gun, that was a pretty good thing. So, yeah, worse choices, and we do see these deployed and even used, especially towards the last stand of the movie, quite a few times. And it would seem like a non-com, a sergeant would carry one of these. So, from that point, the section does further break down into squadrons. There are 2 squads consisting each of 4 Marines within the section, all nominally under the command of a sergeant. And within those 4 squads, you have a corporal, a lance corporal, and 2 private or private first class. It's kind of the breakdown. And even there, the squad breaks down into 2 two-man teams. You have a gun team and a rifle team. So let's first talk about the rifle. In this team, you have 2 Marines armed each with an M41A pulse rifle, although in Aliens, we usually see these guys carrying the optional M240 flamethrower, or torch as it's often called. You can see it in his hands here. This is the figure of Frost. Kind of interesting they made Frost. Not to say he wasn't an interesting character, but I don't know. Just with all the Marines they could have made, they happened to have the likeness to him, so they used him. He has a couple of unique features, including carrying his own VP70 on his hip here in a holster. It's interesting that in this outfit, privates, because he was a private first class, could carry sidearms. Typically in the U.S. military, that's not the case, but not always. Yeah, here's his flamethrower. And those were optional equipment that typically would be in the support gear to be called upon if and when needed. 4 to 8, depending on the strength, would be there, because as you can understand, it's a close range kind kind of a CQB weapon. Really only good out to about 30 meters, and with limited fuel on board. Yeah, his thing's a little wiggly. Let me try the other one. You can always put a little nail polish or light glue in there. But yeah, that's a little better. If he tumps over, he tumps over. Oh well. I'll just set him aside now. He was standing earlier, a little kind of cocked forward, but that's okay. What I was trying to set him to do is so I could grab another flamer here to show you up close. Here it is. These extras usually came in the accessory pack. This weighed about 2.8 kilograms, loaded with a full fuel tank, and had an igniter, and then it shot out sticky fuel under pressure when you squeeze the grip back here. And, well, could be very dangerous. Just ask Frost. The real world, this isn't really based on any single gun or even piece of equipment. It's pretty custom built. Now the body here is loosely, it is from an M16 AR-15, although highly modified. And part of the front end is actually from an M203 grenade launcher. But everything else is just bits and bobs taken here and there. It's a cool weapon though. I have a couple of these. The Sergeant Hendricks over there. Oh, sorry, Wendricks actually came with a flamer too. In the film, we see two guys carrying these. Typically, it's the two other guys in the rifle team. Although in a normal arrangement, they would have made the pulse rifle. Oh well. He also has a removable helmet that not all of them do. So, that's the rifle team. What about everyone's favorite, the gun team? So, the gun team consists of a spotter slash, covering person, usually armed with the M41A, and in the case of the movies, also the M314 tracker. But of course, the main element is the smart gunner themselves. So there are two in the total of 8 Marines, and this is really a fan favorite character, Vasquez. The good news is I do have Vasquez, and I do have an M56 smart gun. The bad news is this isn't the original Vasquez that had the full rig. I'd like to have that one, but they're too expensive. I'm not going to do that. But I have this one, which in a lot of ways I actually like more the kind of the simple, understated. This is supposedly the character from, later on in the film. And I do have this gun, came from a different NECA figure, so we'll make do, I guess. So the smart gunners went through advanced weapons training and were, pretty bulky. The M56 itself fires 10 by 28 millimeter caseless. They were high explosive and armor piercing, 230 grain and a block of repellent. And this gun had a rate of fire of about 1,200 rounds per minute. It was 122 centimeters long, not tiny, with a barrel nearly 50 centimeters. And it was capable of either full auto, not surprisingly, or 4-round burst. On top of that, it was good out to about 1,500 meters, at least effective range. And it fed from a 500-round drum mag and was powered by a lithium battery. Both the battery and drum were designed to be easily replaced, topped off in the field. So that's good. And basically, because of the whole rig, but again, which I don't have, I apologize again, it was meant to be a machine gun, a light to medium machine gun that could be immediately deployed. They didn't have to be set up. That's because this was one element of a group. In addition to this, you had an arm, which connected to an M56 harness, and all of that also connected to a head-mounted display system. It was auto-targeting in a way. It would actually even move itself thanks to the arm kind of pushing the operator to point center of mass. Now, the operator could easily push away and override it, so they had to learn how to let the gun kind of do its thing and direct. And it was all connected to a computer that would have been on the chest and was pretty smart, hence the Smartgun part. They could override if they pointed it away from a target to another one. It could reacquire that. It would give them locking on features in the heads-up display system, tones included. It had various detection systems, including infrared, and just all around a really impressive piece of kit. Also very heavy at over 17.5 kilograms. So, yeah, and that includes the harness, the arm, the ammo, everything. And if you pulled the battery out, it was essentially deactivated. Now, the gun has two grips, one in the back, one in the front. No real sights on it because it wasn't really meant to be fired, although it could be fired solo. It didn't require the harness and arm to shoot. It just needed them really to do its smart gun thing. In the real world, the prop was made from a German World War II MG42. Even in the 80s when this was done, those were still pretty common. And it was dreamed up, at least the sketch, by James Cameron. He wanted something futuristic, technological, big, intimidating, but also that was based on real-world principles. So, no Buck Rogers ray guns. And then this was given over to the British props house, and yeah, they started with an MG42. Then they used a lot of motorcycle bike parts. The grip in the back, the grip in the front, even the front of the gun that kind of conceals the muzzle. All parts from a bike. And this was a heavy prop. In universe, these were actually built to be lightweight with a lot of composite and carbon fiber, even polymer bits and bobs. But in the real world, it was a lot of kind of crudely welded steel and other metal. So pretty heavy dealio. The arm was actually a Steadicam harness arrangement, so the actors could kind of walk around. It was still pretty cumbersome, but an interesting gun and very iconic to the Aliens film. Again, this is the one I have, and I'm still happy with it. If I find the Series 9 version for reasonable money, I'll pick it up one day. I do like that this version is in an alternative outfit, the BDUs, which is some of the stuff, and she does have a knife strapped to her leg, and this is actually removable, unlike most of the Marines, and she has a non-regulation pistol. In the real world, it's a Smith & Wesson Model 39. I don't know in universe if that's what it's supposed to be or not. But, and you can tell the holster is kind of ad hoc. But, all in all, very iconic. I don't think Vasquez... It was actually interesting to have a film with two very strong female protagonists. Good deal. So that's the one heavy gun that the team, really even the squad, was kind of based around. And now we can return to where we began. The UA-571 drone gun, robot, sentry, what have you. This is the C variant, meaning it mounts the M30 autocannon. The D variant actually mounts a laser system, and the E actually mounts a 40mm grenade launcher. So that's kind of the differences in the designations. Now, the team on the LV-426 had 4 of these. and they were used to make a perimeter after the dropship was lost and the APC damaged, destroyed. And this actually comes with the accessory pack. It's pretty neat. Has its battery here. And this might look different from the Smartgun, but it's actually also based on an MG42. Although it actually has an MG0815 drum mag instead of the 42s. But it too holds 500 rounds of 10 by 28 caseless. So it fires the same ammunition. And it actually has a synthetic shell to bulk it up, and it has a targeting system here, sensor and targeting. I should say the Smartgun, the M56, has about a 30-degree detection arc. This, since it's an automated system, is more 60 degrees, but they can be configured to kind of sweep about as much as you need or want. Of course, they are battery powered, and they come with this quick deploy tripod. They actually are stowed in a case, which is how they survived the crash and damage, and they're designed to be quickly deployed in under a couple of minutes in the field to set up a perimeter. They actually use friend or foe tags to automatically determine who to fire at, but they can actually be programmed and controlled because they use microwave to connect to their command console, basically their laptop computer. Good old ladies. Those flip open here. So from this, you can mount the world's meanest door cam ring camera, manually firing it or telling it not to fire, or you can set parameters. You can program it to shoot at specific target profiles or not. Remote access. You actually get 2 of these and you get 2 laptops and 2 of these drone guns in the set, so you can make a perimeter for a display. They have a slightly lower rate of fire at about 1100 RPM. They also have an automatic cutoff to make sure they won't overheat. Cook off. Like the M56, they have a small cryogenic system to cool things off. Like the M56 as well, they have a rotating breech feed system that's electronically powered, moved, ignited. And they're about as effective in the range and everything else, although of course they are AI controlled, so that has its own limitations. And they can cook through their 500 round drum. Of course it can't be replaced, but you gotta go out and do it rather quickly. Interesting piece of kit, to be sure. Also a very big battery. Now, oops, sorry, I was trying to move this around here. Cords. If you don't remember these from the Aliens film, don't be ashamed. They weren't in the original version that was shown in theaters. They were actually in the extended edition. And that's because a lot of them thought that the props were kind of crudely made and didn't look so great. They did actually move. They had hydraulics built in for the film set to kind of give that sense of motion. Again, practical effects, guys. Practical working guns, at least to some extent as well. Yeah, but these were controlled. They were set up by Hudson and Vasquez and remotely controlled by them. And, well, they delayed the Aliens for a while, probably taking their toll more than once. But yeah, they're based on the same Smartgun technology, same basic gun, just remotely operated, and they're part of the full support equipment. Speaking of equipment, I guess it's time to talk about the one. I'm not going to say the quote. I'm not going to do it. Only a few science fiction franchises, even military type franchises, are able to successfully make a weapon that just enters into the the common vernacular, the lexicon. Obviously, Star Wars has done it with a couple: the Stormtrooper blaster, the 11, or Han Solo's pistol. But it's not a very common thing. Even the phaser from Star Trek, people know it, but it's not as iconic and beloved for it and what it is itself. Well, Aliens has it. The M41A pulse rifle, being held here by Corporal Hicks. His job was to guard, to be the point man and tracker operator too, for the Smartgun operator Drake and his team. But this gun, yeah, is iconic as it gets. In universe, it's said to be manufactured by Armat, although originally it was just said to be made by Colt. This changed. The one in his hands has the sling on it. We have another version over here from NECA. This is the slingless version. And there's even a black version. This is just such a standard gun in the universe. Not only is it standard issue for the U.S. Colonial Marines, also the U.S. Army, also Weyland-Yutani uses them, and many others. In universe, this is said to have been designed by John LaForge, who was a retired Marine corporal. It was to replace the old Harrington rifle, and in universe it said he created the first prototype in his own home workshop, and he entered into a competition in the year 2170 up against manufacturers of much greater rapport, renown, and capability. In a lot of ways, this kind of mirrors the Melvin Johnson story. He created the M1941 Johnson, both rifle and light machine gun, and actually would later go work with Eugene Stoner. He was actually at Armalite before Eugene Stoner, I should say. Although, yeah, he kind of quickly dropped off. I feel like he doesn't get enough credit today, but that's neither here nor there. Here is the gun, the base gun here. It fired 10 by 24 millimeter, so slightly shorter than our Smart Gun, and it was a 210 grain bullet, and it had a rotating breech with electronic pulse system. And was famously based on the Thompson M1. From the NECA toy to a real M1 Thompson. It's a motto, of course, now. Fun fact, James Cameron came up with the original idea sketch for this, kind of on the same principle as the Smart Gun. And originally they were going to use the still new HK MP5A3 with its collapsing stock. But as is famously known on film, Cameron felt that the MP5 firing 9mm just didn't have that pizzazz, that muzzle flash he wanted. So, trying to figure out something kind of similar, they alighted upon the Thompson. Specifically, yes, the M1 variant. There are a lot of differences between the 1920s version, either the 1921 or the 1928, compared with the version made in World War II for the military. But one quick and easy way to tell them apart is the charging handle, the cocking handle. On the World War II version, it's on the side. On the previous version, it's on top. Also, there's no compensator at the end of the 10-inch barrel. And of course, it fed from 30 round or 20 round stick magazines, 45 ACP. There would have been still quite a few of these available for the film. And from this, they would create one of the most iconic guns. This was the starting point. It should also be pointed that James Cameron took a very hands-on attitude towards the famous pulse rifle sound. It said that he spent a whole weekend, 2 days, kind of tinkering with the sound, perfecting it, getting it just right for that futuristic yet still believable. No pew pew lasers for him. He wanted something truly believable. So can you see the resemblance between, the guns here? We're gonna throw the other one. I think NECA did a really good job scaling it down. But maybe you don't quite see the Thompson. Well, okay, fine. We'll do this. Since you insisted, here we go. A replica airsoft of the pulse rifle. Should be pointed out that these were actually done in brown originally, but green's kind of the default color. Goes to show you. It also kind of goes to show you the real thing here versus the copy, even with the correct charging handle on the airsoft. It still has the ejection port, like we already talked about with the VP70, even being caseless. It would probably still need that. They even had the takedown catch back here replicated, as well as several other controls and bobbits. But of course these were heavily modified. For one, originally the Thompson has a wood grip. All the props had synthetic. The magazine area is really heavily altered. We have a round counter here, although inside it does actually still house a magazine. The in-world explanation, it's 99 rounds of that caseless ammo, although in a nod to Vietnam era 20 round M16 mags, which at the time they usually only loaded to about 18 rounds. They usually only loaded these up to 95. From there, we have a carry handle, kind of reminiscent of an AR on top. Obviously on this gun, there's just its rear sight, but of course you could easily remove that. Mount something on top. And then in the front side is removed off the barrel. And we have some elements of a Franke Spaz 12, plus some elements made in the props department, like these shrouds, all covering up a very shortened Remington 870, known in universe as the U1. Of course, in the real world, this is a shotgun, 12-gauge shotgun. But in universe, it was meant to be a 30mm grenade launcher. So, take it as you will. Obviously, for civilians, it would be a short-barreled anyway. And on this airsoft, it does actually move, if I can do it for you. Showing a faux shell there. And there would have been a trigger here, at least on some of the props. They made 3 to 4 live firing props for the film, plus more out of resin rubber for background scenes. However, of those 3 to 4, only one was a hero prop that actually had a working 870. So some props have a trigger here, some don't. It'd be nice if it had it, but I could always just drill a little hole and take a gun trigger and put it in there. Not a big deal. So that's kind of the elements of it. Although we do have this unique shoulder stock. Obviously, the Thompson M1 just has a wood stock. Now, the earlier Thompsons had removable stocks, but one of the economies of the M1 was to just go to a standard fixed stock held on by 2 screws. Not only is this stock metal, it actually pulls out. It isn't just in and out. It actually has a total of 3 positions, as it originally should. I can't talk. I've been talking for a while. And there's a button in here. As you see, it's pretty tight. And then it fully extends out. I always think of this as something inspired by the MP5 that they didn't use. With the stock fully out, it's a little under 85 centimeters long. With it fully in, we're at about 70, maybe a little less, and it has a barrel of just under 25 millimeters. In universe, it's said that this weighs about 3 kilograms, unloaded, unaccessorized, and that can jump up to nearly 5 kilograms because a loaded mag itself is about 1.5. Then you also throw on a sling, a few other things, and boom, Bob's your uncle. So that also say that there is a lithium battery powering it up here. Technically this has one too, but in universe, it can ignite up to 10,000 rounds before recharging. It actually slots into a rifle rack, like on the Sulaco, to recharge these automatically, or you can manually plug in a cable, like down here, to charge it in the field. And of course, magazines can be swapped out in the field as well. The underbarrel 30mm grenade launcher is permanently affixed on the M41A, although later versions would make this more of a modular component. Flipping over, this actually does continue to replicate the Thompson's controls here and here, even having T-tents. Looking at the one here, this one's just loose because it doesn't, it's a semi-auto. Even has the same mag release here as over here, and it does actually release the mag and trigger here and here. Honestly, not bad for what they are. Metal. And the add-ons are plastic polymer, which a lot of the prop stuff was too. Just having fun, guys. Pulse rifle. Good times. So in universe, this has capability of firing up to 900 rounds per minute. It's full automatic, 4-round burst, or semi-auto. It can be equipped with a 3-power TV IR type sight and a few other accessories. Can have a sling or not, it depends on the scene we see it in. And in universe, it was built out of modern composite materials, polymers, and it was meant to be sealed from vacuum, submersion in water, kind of all-weather, yada yada yada, because military gun. Thompson. It said that it was adopted in 2171, and the first versions had problems, but it wasn't the design's fault. No, it wasn't the Marines' fault. It was the bad ammo. Again, mirroring experiences in Vietnam. See, when they first put the XM116E1 into Vietnam, they changed up the powder the 223 round used, and this led to some issues. Not all of them, but several. And the in-universe history of the pulse rifle mirrors that. Also, there was an event kind of mirroring early Vietnam where these jammed, overheated, and Marines died. So, kind of playing into real-world history. Now, their initial version was adopted as the M41, but very quickly the M41A was released as a revision, again mirroring the M16A1. It had additional cooling, and it had other revisions, and the ammunition was corrected. The faulty 10mm was done away with. And after that, it's said to have had a very good reputation for dependability, reliability, and flexibility. Again, mirroring the M16A2 and M4 and other guns that we see today. And this was standard issue for the U.S. Marine Corps throughout our time on Hadley's Hope, LV-426. And we definitely see Hicks teaching Ripley how to shoot one in the film. And they do the thing that Hollywood does that always bugs me. They say that when the stock is fully in, it's a quote-unquote carbine, and when it's fully pulled out, it's a rifle. You see this with a lot of Star Wars stuff, too, where they'll say, like, the version without a stock is a carbine, and the version with the stock is a rifle. That's not how guns work. Carbines are usually denoted by barrel length. Yes, true, they usually can have collapsing stocks, but these days rifles do too, and they have longer barrels. And frankly, a combat gun is not very effective without a buttstock. Hollywood, even though I know you think it looks cool, you really do need a shoulder stock. It's just kind of part of it. I digress. What was I saying? Yeah, standard issue, the pulse rifle, very famous gun, and yeah, some of the props were reused for Alien 3 and all kinds of fun things. There's a few different airsoft guns. This is actually the only airsoft gun I own, although I'm tempted to get a Imperial E11 sometime too. And I'm also tempted to try to dress this one up using components I have around. I might do that for a main Mishaco channel video. But yeah, this is what most of your Marines were armed with, and was around and around. So that's what we got going on. That was the primary rifle squad's gun, and it is a cool one at that. So we've got one more thing we should talk about before we wrap this episode up. We end with your favorite character. You know he is Private Hudson, Bill Paxton. Of course, he's carrying an M41A as well. Like Hicks, he was a spotter for a Smartgun operator. And kind of ending where we began the video, standard issue for that personnel was the M314, the 314 tracker, motion tracker. We looked at this in Bishop's hand originally too. Now, fun fact, this is actually originally made in universe, it said, for like law enforcement, security, and rescue, detecting life signs, motion rather I should say, and primarily for rescue. But the Marines found it very useful. It uses ultrasound, sound waves, to detect targets. So it's an active sound pinging, and on the display it shows you kind of bearing, direction, intensity of the movement. And it can be programmed to kind of filter out small things, although this doesn't always work. It can also be programmed to filter out friendly things using an IFF tag. Again, it doesn't always work, but it's in theory. Open countryside in a big area, it can detect out to 1,000 meters. But when you get in a big building with lots of walls and things, that gets cut down to 50 and even 20 meters. And things can get more confusing, even though Hudson was definitely reading it right. So yeah, standard issue. And had pros and cons. For one thing, it is big and takes up a hand. But, it's a tool and makes sense. It was used for establishing and protecting a perimeter, just protecting the smart gunner, helping detect things. Of course, the prop, well, it was made from everything. Some camera parts. The actual casing it was built on was a drill casing. There was a laboratory lamp integrated into it. It's amazing hodgepodge of things. Of course, in the 1980s, they didn't really have the technology to make an actual working screen for this size. So for kind of far away shots, the props made just were a light, kind of blinking or moving. And then when they needed to actually show stuff on the screen, they had to use an enlarged prop that was forced perspective to look smaller. But yeah. Of course, today we could make a screen like that infinitely smaller than this, but back then it was just not possible to have a CRT that tiny that actually could display anything you'd want it to display. So they had to kind of pipe it in and force it around. They made a lot of props for the film, some pretty inactive, some displaying. But its sound and motion and part in the film are almost as famous as the pulse rifle itself. And wow, yeah, Hicks is pretty famous. Oh, Hudson's got to be the most famous Marine, don't you think? So even though this isn't a gun, I thought I had to be mentioned in this kind of equipment video. Really neat. And I really enjoy these NECA figures. What do you think? With Hudson, Hicks, and Vasquez, we almost have the complete gun team set up. Unfortunately, the only really member of the rifle teams we have is Frost, so at least we have him. And unfortunately, while we don't have Sergeant Apone, at least we have Sergeant Wendricks that'll fit in. And even if we don't have Gorman, we at least have Bishop. He can stand in for the command team, so it's a pretty good lineup. More importantly, between these all, we have all the guns, all the equipment. We'll talk more about uniforms and some stuff on their belts in the third and final episode, in which they meet new friends on Hadley's Hope. They go for colonists, but they meet much more eager friends. They really want to play. I mean, and that's what it's really about, right? The journey. They're going to have a lot of fun. They're even going to take them home to show them to Mother. And that's just I mean, they even wine and dine them before impregnating them. You know, that's gotta be worth something, right? But that'll be next time. What do you think about the guns, the props from Aliens? Back in the 80s, James Cameron was really known for using real-world or believable firearms in his films and using them quite extensively. I don't know about today, but of course the climate, the culture is very different. Well, let's wrap this up. And we end where we began. Hope you enjoyed it. It's a lot of fun making these. They always relax me. Appreciate you watching this part. If you haven't seen the other two parts, please do check them out. And let me know what you think. The NECA figures are, like I said, the 7-inch scale, and the Eagle Moss die-cast are of their kind of medium scale, which is always fun. As always, if you could, please like, share, subscribe. And if you kind of like military history and accoutrement equipment, check out the main Mishaco channel, where we do a lot of this. With that, this is Misha. Catch you very soon, next time. I want to introduce you to a personal friend of mine. This is a M41A pulse rifle, 10mm over under 30mm grenade launcher. Game over, man! Game over! What the fuck are we gonna do now?